Officer Reynolds slams Jasmine Cole against the cruiser hood handcuffs, cutting into her wrists. "Please check my credentials," she whispers. The officer sneers until his radio crackles. "Sir, she's NIA Deputy Director Cole, our primary target's handler." Before I dive into this shocking story of injustice and redemption, tell me where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe to stay updated on more true stories of courage in the face of discrimination. Now let's uncover how a simple case of racial profiling spiraled into one of the biggest corruption scandals this department had ever seen. The afternoon sun beat down on the pristine streets of Oakwood Heights, an affluent suburban neighborhood in Charleston, South Carolina, where property values soared into the millions and less than 2% of residents were black. Jasmine Cole, a 35-year-old black woman and undercover National Intelligence Agency deputy director, adjusted her simple cotton blouse as she parked her modest sedan near her surveillance location. Nothing about her appearance suggested her senior position at one of the most powerful intelligence agencies in the country, which was precisely the point. She reached for her specialized camera with telephoto lens and began taking photographs of a particular house across the street, documenting the comings and goings as she had been for the past several weeks. Her concentration was broken by the sound of a police cruiser slowing to a stop behind her, vehicle lights flashing, but sirens silent. Two patrol officers emerged. Officer James Reynolds, a white man in his 40s with a weathered face and a swagger that spoke of someone who enjoyed his authority, and Officer Kyle Bennett, noticeably younger, perhaps in his early 20s, who hung back slightly, his hand resting near his holster. Jasmine remained perfectly still, camera lowered to her lap, as Reynolds approached with an aggressive stride that immediately set alarm bells ringing in her trained mind. "Hands where I can see them," Reynolds barked without preamble, no explanation offered for why she was being stopped. Jasmine complied immediately, her movements deliberate and slow. "Good afternoon, officer," she said calmly, her voice steady despite the unnecessary hostility. "May I ask what seems to be the problem?" Reynolds didn't answer her question, instead demanding ID now. When Jasmine informed him that her identification was in her purse on the passenger seat, asking permission to reach for it. Slowly, Reynolds's response was immediate and physical. As her hand moved carefully toward the purse, Reynolds roughly grabbed her arm, yanking her halfway out of the vehicle. "I said don't move," he shouted, though he had explicitly asked for her ID seconds before. "I thought you were reaching for a weapon." The accusation was absurd. Jasmine had clearly stated her intentions and moved with deliberate slowness, but she recognized the scenario unfolding around her. She had seen it too many times before, both professionally and personally. Despite her rising anger, Jasmine maintained her composure, asking calmly but firmly, "Officer, I was complying with your request for identification. I stated clearly that I was reaching for my purse. Can you please explain why I'm being detained?" Reynolds ignored her reasonable question, ordering her out of the vehicle completely. "Step out now. Hands behind your back." Bennett finally spoke up, his voice betraying uncertainty. "Reynolds, maybe we should—" But his senior partner cut him off with a sharp glance. As Jasmine was forced against her car, Reynolds roughly applied handcuffs, tightening them well beyond what was necessary or comfortable. The metal dug painfully into her wrists as Reynolds conducted a search that went well beyond professional boundaries, his hands lingering in ways that made his younger partner look away in discomfort. By now, several residents had emerged from their manicured homes to watch the scene unfold. Some had phones out, recording the incident from a safe distance. Jasmine noted with a sinking feeling how several white residents nodded approvingly at the officers, one woman even commenting loudly enough to be heard, "Finally doing something about these people casing our neighborhood." During his invasive search, Reynolds discovered Jasmine's concealed weapon, legally carried and properly holstered. Well, what do we have here?" he said, his tone suggesting he'd discovered evidence of serious wrongdoing rather than a legally carried firearm. "You want to explain this?" Jasmine maintained her strategic calm, offering minimal information while requesting to contact her supervisor. "That's a legally registered weapon that I'm authorized to carry. If you check my credentials in the purse, you'll find my permit and badge. I'd like to make a call to my supervisor now." Reynolds scoffed openly at this. "Right, and I'm the director of the FBI." He held up her specialized camera. "Taking pictures of houses in this neighborhood with a concealed weapon. You expect me to believe you're some kind of government agent?" His emphasis on "you're" carried unmistakable racial undertones. "You don't exactly look the part, do you?" he added with a smirk that caused Jasmine's jaw to tighten momentarily before she regained her carefully maintained composure. Throughout the escalating situation, Jasmine continued providing only essential information, calculating every response to avoid further provocation while still asserting her rights. Her years of training allowed her to maintain this delicate balance even as Reynolds continued making comments laden with prejudice, suggesting she must have borrowed the expensive camera equipment and questioning how she could afford to even be in this neighborhood. Meanwhile, Bennett's discomfort with his partner's conduct grew increasingly obvious, though he remained largely passive in the face of his senior officer's authority. Officer Bennett, visibly uncomfortable with the direction the situation was taking, discreetly stepped back toward their patrol car while Reynolds continued his verbal harassment of Jasmine. The younger officer slid into the driver's seat and ran Jasmine's ID through their system, an action that should have been the first step rather than the rough detention she'd experienced. Bennett's expression shifted dramatically as the computer screen populated with information. Not the criminal record Reynolds clearly expected, but a series of classified information flags and security clearance indicators that signaled something far different. His face paled noticeably as he realized the magnitude of their error, particularly Reynolds' aggressive and unprofessional conduct. Meanwhile, Reynolds continued his harassment unaware of what his partner had discovered. "So what exactly were you photographing, huh? Planning a break-in, casing the neighborhood?" He held Jasmine's camera mockingly out of reach when she requested he handle the expensive equipment with care. Throughout the ordeal, Jasmine maintained remarkable composure, her training evident in how she managed the volatile situation. Rather than escalating with anger or panic, she waited for the inevitable moment when her identity would be confirmed. That moment came closer when she made a seemingly innocuous comment that carried significant weight. "Officer Reynolds, you might want to consider how your actions today will be viewed by the investigators of Operation Kingfisher." The effect was immediate and telling. Reynolds's confident smirk faltered for just a moment, his eyes widening slightly before he covered his reaction with increased aggression. "Is that supposed to mean something to me? Some kind of threat?" he demanded, moving closer to Jasmine's face in an attempt at intimidation. Before Jasmine could respond, Bennett interrupted the confrontation, hurrying from the cruiser with the computer printout in hand. "Reynolds," he said urgently, "I need to speak with you. Now." His tone conveyed enough seriousness that Reynolds reluctantly stepped away from Jasmine, though not before giving her another warning glare. Bennett showed his partner the screen, pointing to specific security classifications and credentials that caused Reynolds's expression to shift from dismissive to disbelieving. "This can't be right," Reynolds muttered, looking back at Jasmine with new uncertainty. "The system must be compromised. There's no way she's—" The arrival of a black government-issue SUV with tinted windows interrupted his denial. The vehicle screeched to a halt nearby, and 3 plainclothes agents emerged with efficient, purposeful movements. The lead agent, a distinguished black man in his 50s with close-cropped gray hair and an unmistakable air of authority, approached directly. Director Marcus Washington didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Release Deputy Director Cole immediately," he ordered, his voice carrying the weight of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. Reynolds stood frozen for a moment before Bennett moved quickly to remove Jasmine's handcuffs. "Sir, we were just following protocol for suspicious," Reynolds began, but Washington cut him off with a raised hand. We'll discuss your protocol later, officer. Right now, I suggest you focus on damage control. As the handcuffs came off, Jasmine rubbed her wrists where the metal had left angry red marks. Despite the pain and humiliation she'd endured, she maintained perfect composure, straightening her jacket and retrieving her belongings with dignity. "Thank you, Officer Bennett," she said quietly, acknowledging the younger officer's eventual intervention. "Your diligence in actually checking my credentials is appreciated." The pointed comment wasn't lost on anyone present. By now, the neighborhood onlookers who had been so quick to assume Jasmine's guilt watched in shocked silence as the officers who had detained her now stood at attention, clearly deferential to her and the new arrivals. The shift in power dynamics was palpable, with several residents lowering their phones or quickly retreating back into their homes, suddenly less eager to be associated with what had transpired. Before departing with her team, Jasmine approached Reynolds, who stood stiffly by the cruiser, his earlier confidence evaporated. She leaned in slightly and spoke in a low voice that only he could hear. "Officer Reynolds, the house I was photographing belongs to your police chief. Consider carefully why that might be of interest to the NIA." She walked away without waiting for a response, leaving Reynolds visibly shaken as the color drained from his face. As Jasmine joined Director Washington in the SUV, the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place for the stunned officers and observers. Her presence in the neighborhood hadn't been random at all. The National Intelligence Agency's deputy director had been conducting surveillance on the police chief's residence as part of an ongoing investigation. An investigation that Reynolds' actions had now complicated and potentially compromised. As the government vehicle pulled away, Jasmine exchanged a meaningful look with Washington. "Well, she said with remarkable understatement, "that certainly wasn't how I planned to make contact with the department." The sleek minimalist conference room at NIA headquarters hummed with focused energy as Jasmine debriefed her team on the unexpected events in Oakwood Heights. Digital screens displayed maps of Charleston personnel files and surveillance photos, including several of Police Chief Richard Harrison's colonial-style home. "Our cover is partially compromised," Jasmine explained, her voice calm but serious as she stood before her 5-person task force. "But this incident gives us an unexpected opening." She tapped her tablet, bringing up the body camera footage from Officers Reynolds and Bennett alongside videos taken by neighborhood residents. The team watched in silence as the detention played out from multiple angles, each showing clear procedural violations and thinly veiled racial bias. Alexandra Diaz, the team's legal expert, shook her head as she made notes. "There are at least 7 direct violations I can count just from these clips. We could bury Reynolds tomorrow if that was our goal." Jasmine nodded but remained focused on the bigger picture. "Reynolds is a symptom, not the cause. His reaction when I mentioned Operation Kingfisher confirms our intelligence." She pulled up a timeline of their 6-month investigation into corruption within the Charleston Police Department. The screens filled with evidence of systematic protection for drug trafficking operations, evidence tampering, and coordinated harassment of specific demographic groups to keep them from settling in wealthy neighborhoods like Oakwood Heights. As the team analyzed the new information, the conference room door opened and Director Marcus Washington entered. The room immediately straightened in respect. "The Attorney General's office is concerned about the exposure," Washington said without preamble. "They're suggesting we consider pulling back rather than risking interagency conflict." Jasmine expected this reaction, but had prepared her counter-argument. "With respect, sir, this detention gives us leverage we didn't have before. Reynolds made a critical mistake by reacting to Kingfisher." Washington considered this, his expression thoughtful. "Walk me through your history with this department. Why do I get the feeling this isn't just about our current investigation?" The question opened a window into Jasmine's past that she rarely discussed. A series of images appeared on screen. Jasmine's progression through law enforcement and intelligence careers, consistently excelling despite obvious barriers. "I graduated top of my class at Quantico," she explained as the team viewed her exemplary record, then spent 3 years being passed over for advancement in favor of less qualified white colleagues. When I finally made team leader, my first corruption case was buried by political pressure. The images showed a younger Jasmine receiving commendations alongside statistics showing the demographic disparities in promotion rates. But this isn't personal, she continued. It's about systems that protect corruption through the same mechanisms that enable discrimination. Washington nodded, satisfied with her professional perspective. What's your next move, then? The question shifted them back to immediate strategy. Jasmine brought up Officer Reynolds's personnel file, revealing a pattern that confirmed their suspicions. Reynolds has 17 complaints of racial profiling in his record, all dismissed, all buried in administrative reviews. She swiped to another document. And look who signs off on those reviews. The team leaned forward as Assistant Chief Victor Pearson's signature appeared on screen. Pearson is our primary target, Jasmine continued. The evidence suggests he's orchestrating the department's involvement in drug trafficking through the port. Chief Harrison either knows and benefits or deliberately remains ignorant. A team analyst raised a concerning point. Reynolds' aggressive response to you might not have been random. The timing suggests someone may have recognized you from previous surveillance. This realization caused a ripple of tension through the room. If Jasmine had been identified, their entire operation could be compromised. As if confirming these fears, Jasmine's personal phone chimed with a text message from an unlisted number. Cameras work both ways, Deputy Director. The implied threat hung in the air as the team processed its implications. Jasmine's decision was immediate and decisive. We accelerate the timeline. They know we're watching, which means evidence is being destroyed as we speak. She turned to her communications specialist. I need to contact our insider at Internal Affairs. Minutes later, Jasmine was speaking via secure line with Detective Layla Carter, their one trusted contact within the Charleston Police Department. The detention wasn't random. Carter confirmed, her voice tense. Reynolds was on a special assignment in that neighborhood. Word came down from Pearson himself to maintain heightened patrols, specifically looking for suspicious individuals near the chief's house. The connection became clear. Pearson had somehow identified Jasmine during her surveillance and set up the confrontation with Reynolds, likely hoping to intimidate or expose their investigation. I'm sending you something now, Carter continued. Evidence linking Reynolds directly to Pearson's operation. He doesn't just enforce Pearson's racial profiling, he helps move product through the neighborhoods they've cleaned up. The evidence appeared on Jasmine's screen. Financial records showing suspicious payments, patrol schedules aligned with known drug movements, and text messages with barely concealed criminal intent. This new information confirmed their worst suspicions while opening new investigative pathways. Jasmine gathered her team for a strategic pivot. We need to identify the leak, she emphasized. Someone within our agency or adjacent departments has compromised our surveillance. The team began reviewing all personnel with access to their operation, searching for the informant who had exposed Jasmine to Pearson's network. As the investigation intensified, so did the stakes. For every piece of evidence they gathered, Jasmine knew the opposition was working just as hard to undermine their efforts and protect the profitable corruption they'd established. What do you think about police officers who abuse their power? Comment number 1. If you believe officers like Reynolds should face immediate dismissal, or comment number 2 if you think systemic change is needed rather than focusing on individual officers. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of justice prevailing against discrimination. Now, what happens when an investigation becomes this personal? How far will the corrupt officers go to protect their operation once they realize who Jasmine really is? Let's continue to the next part of this shocking true story. The morning news broadcast cast a harsh glow across Jasmine's hotel room as she prepared for the day ahead. the anchorwoman's carefully neutral tone barely concealing the biased narrative being presented. Questions are being raised about federal overreach after an incident involving NIA personnel and Charleston police officers. Sources within the department claim the federal agent failed to properly identify herself during a routine security check in Oakwood Heights. Jasmine shook her head at the predictable spin, noting how quickly the department had mobilized their media contacts. The screen showed a carefully selected image of her looking uncooperative, contrasted with Reynolds in his pressed uniform, giving a statement about following standard procedures when confronted with suspicious activity. Chief Richard Harrison appeared next, his silver hair and practiced smile projecting trustworthiness as he defended his officers. We respect our federal partners, but expect the same professional courtesy and proper identification protocols that any law enforcement agency would require. The narrative was clear. They were positioning Jasmine as the problem, not the department's documented pattern of discrimination and corruption. Her secure phone rang with a Washington, D.C. area code. "Cole," she answered crisply, already anticipating the conversation to come. The voice of Deputy Attorney General Phillips carried notes of political calculation rather than justice. "The Charleston situation is becoming complicated, Deputy Director. The mayor has called the director personally, expressing concerns about jurisdictional overreach and potential damage to community police relations." Jasmine contained her frustration at the predictable political pressure. "Sir, with respect, we've uncovered substantial evidence linking Assistant Chief Pearson to organized drug trafficking through the port. Chief Harrison's involvement is still being determined, but at minimum, he's created an environment where racial profiling serves as cover for criminal activity." Phillips sighed, the sound of a man weighing career implications rather than ethical imperatives. "The director wants you to consider focusing solely on the drug trafficking angle. Drop the profiling investigation. It's too politically charged, especially with the mayor's re-election campaign underway." The subtext was clear. Powerful interests were uncomfortable with an investigation that connected racial discrimination to police corruption. "Sir, the profiling isn't incidental to the corruption. It's the mechanism that enables it. They target minority residents to create fear and establish control over specific neighborhoods, which then become secure distribution points." Her argument was sound, but politics rarely yielded to facts alone. Phillips' response confirmed her concerns. "You have 48 hours to produce conclusive evidence connecting the profiling directly to drug trafficking. Otherwise, we're reassigning the case to focus solely on narcotics enforcement." The call ended with Jasmine staring at the wall, calculating her next move in an increasingly constricted space. A priority alert from her team's cyber specialist interrupted her thoughts. "Someone's accessed your personnel file," Maya reported, concern evident in her voice. "Access originated from a terminal inside Charleston PD headquarters. You're using administrator credentials." The implications were serious. They were digging for leverage against her, looking for vulnerabilities or past incidents to exploit. Jasmine was reviewing security protocols when another call came through, this one unexpected. "Deputy Director Cole, this is Officer Bennett, Kyle Bennett, from yesterday." The younger officer's voice carried the tension of someone taking an enormous risk. "I can't talk long, but there are things you should know. Things I've seen that aren't right." Jasmine proceeded, cautiously aware this could be an attempt to feed her misinformation. "I'm listening, Officer Bennett." His words came quickly, as if he feared being overheard. "Reynolds and some others have been watching your hotel since last night. They know where you're staying, and maintenance was called to your government vehicle this morning, but I overheard Reynolds telling someone it was already taken care of." The warning was timely and specific enough to suggest Bennett was genuinely concerned. Jasmine thanked him for the information and arranged a secure contact method before ending the call. Within 20 minutes, her team's vehicle expert confirmed Bennett's warning. The brake lines on her government SUV had been subtly compromised, creating a failure that would appear accidental at high speed. The sabotage was professional, nearly undetectable without specific examination. This escalation from intimidation to potentially lethal action confirmed the desperation of those she was investigating. Director Washington arrived at her hotel within the hour, his usual composed demeanor replaced with grave concern. "The Attorney General called me directly," he informed Jasmine as they spoke in a swept room free of surveillance. "There's significant pressure to shut down the operation entirely. The mayor has connections in Washington that reach the White House." Jasmine had anticipated this development, but still felt the frustration of seeing justice potentially subverted by politics. "They tried to kill me, Marcus," she said, using his first name to emphasize the personal nature of the threat. The brake tampering wasn't amateur work. It was a professional job designed to look like an accident. They're not just trying to stop the investigation, they're eliminating threats. Washington nodded grimly. "I've authorized additional security and resources, but realistically we may be looking at a forced withdrawal within 72 hours unless we have irrefutable evidence." The timeline was tight, but not impossible. "I need Reynolds to incriminate himself and Pearson on record," Jasmine decided. "He's the weak link, ambitious enough to be deeply involved, but not smart enough to avoid mistakes. His reaction to Operation Kingfisher proves he knows more than he should about classified operations." Washington raised an eyebrow at her developing plan. "You're thinking of using yourself as bait." It wasn't a question. "They're already watching me," Jasmine confirmed. "I'll appear vulnerable while wearing multiple recording devices. We'll need backup teams in place, but not visible enough to spook them." As she outlined the specifics of her plan, Washington's expression shifted from concern to reluctant approval. "It's risky, but we're running out of options and time." The strategy session was interrupted by an encrypted message from Detective Carter. "Pearson calling emergency meeting with trusted officers tonight. Reynolds included. Location Warehouse 17 at the port." This was the opening they needed. A chance to catch key players together, discussing operations they shouldn't know about. As Jasmine finalized her approach, she confronted the reality that she was matching herself against not just corrupt individuals, but an entrenched system designed to protect itself at all costs. The next 72 hours would determine whether justice or corruption would prevail in Charleston. The Blue Plate Diner sat just off Highway 61, far enough outside Charleston city limits to minimize the risk of being recognized, but close enough for a quick retreat if necessary. Jasmine arrived 20 minutes early, securing a booth with clear sight lines to all entrances and exits her back to the wall, habits from years of fieldwork that had kept her alive in far more dangerous situations than this. She nursed a coffee, appearing casual while maintaining hyper-awareness of everyone who entered. Officer Kyle Bennett arrived precisely on time, out of uniform in jeans and a plain gray t-shirt, scanning the diner nervously before spotting Jasmine. He slid into the booth across from her, hands visibly trembling as he placed a thumb drive on the table and covered it with his napkin. "I shouldn't be here," he began, voice barely above a whisper. "If Reynolds or Pearson find out I contacted you." He left the consequences unspoken but clear. Jasmine made no move toward the drive, instead studying Bennett's face for signs of deception. "Why are you taking this risk, Officer Bennett? Yesterday, you were standing by while your partner violated my civil rights." The question was direct, designed to provoke an emotional response she could evaluate. Bennett's eyes dropped momentarily before meeting hers with unexpected intensity. "My sister married a black man 5 years ago. They have twin boys 4 years old now." He pulled out his phone, showing a photo of 2 smiling children. 3 months ago, my brother-in-law was pulled over by Reynolds while driving my sister's car through Oakwood Heights. The boys were in the back seat." His voice tightened with controlled anger. "Reynolds made him lie face down on the pavement with a gun to his head while the boys watched screaming. The official report said he matched the description of a robbery suspect." The personal connection explained Bennett's willingness to risk his career, possibly his life, but Jasmine remained cautious. "That's a compelling story, Officer Bennett, but I need more than righteous anger. How do I know this isn't an elaborate setup?" Bennett nodded as if he'd expected the question. "The thumb drive has files Reynolds doesn't know I copied, the department's unofficial point system for targeting minorities in affluent neighborhoods. Officers get bonuses for stops that lead to property seizures. Bigger bonuses for arrests that push minority residents to move away from targeted development zones." He leaned forward, lowering his voice further. "But the real evidence is what I recorded at last night's meeting at the port. Pearson specifically discussed ways to discredit you and the federal investigation. They know exactly what you're investigating, which means someone's feeding them information." This confirmed Jasmine's suspicion of an internal leak, a serious security breach that threatened their entire operation. She signaled one of her agents positioned as a truck driver at the counter who casually approached to secure the thumb drive. "If this checks out, you've taken an enormous risk," she acknowledged. "What's your endgame here?" Bennett badge turned in with a clear conscience. "Ois," Bennett shook his head. "I became a cop to help people. My dad was an officer for 30 years, one of the good ones. What's happening in our department isn't just corrupt, it's evil. They're deliberately targeting people based on race, using that to cover drug operations, and nobody's stopping them." His conviction seemed genuine, but Jasmine had encountered skilled liars before. She decided to test his knowledge and sincerity with specific questions about department operations, watching carefully for inconsistencies or rehearsed responses. After 20 minutes of detailed questioning, she was cautiously convinced of his authenticity. "The department has called a press conference for tomorrow," Bennett informed her, checking his watch nervously. "Chief Harrison is going to publicly address recent allegations against the department. It's a smokescreen. Pearson told a select group that a major shipment is coming in during the conference as a distraction. This information aligned with intelligence from their other sources, adding credibility to Bennett's claims." Jasmine made a decisive judgment call. "I'm going to trust you, Officer Bennett, but conditionally. I'll have my team verify everything on this drive before we proceed further." She outlined basic protocols for covert evidence gathering, emphasizing methods that would protect him from discovery. As Bennett absorbed her instructions, his phone buzzed with a text. His expression tightened as he read it. "I've been assigned to security detail for tomorrow's press conference," he said, showing her the message. "All officers are under orders to consider you armed and dangerous if seen near any department facility." The escalation wasn't surprising, but the timing suggested their opposition was moving faster than anticipated. "Pearson and Reynolds were discussing you specifically after the meeting," Bennett continued. "Reynolds is taking this personally now, says you humiliated him, and he's going to return the favor." Jasmine recognized the volatile combination of wounded pride and genuine fear that made Reynolds particularly dangerous. She reached into her jacket and handed Bennett a small device disguised as a standard police radio accessory. "Secure communication untraceable. If things go wrong tomorrow, press this button 3 times and say Blackbird. My team will extract you immediately." Bennett stared at the device, the reality of his situation clearly sinking in. "I could lose everything for this," he said quietly. "My career may be worse." Jasmine didn't offer false reassurance. "Yes, but from what you've told me, you've already lost faith in what that badge currently stands for. The question is whether you're willing to risk everything to make it mean something again." As Bennett left the diner through the back exit, Jasmine contacted her team to begin verifying his information and adapting their strategy for the press conference. If Bennett was genuine, they had gained an invaluable inside perspective. If he was playing them, they had just handed their opponents a perfect opportunity to trap them. Either way, the confrontation that would determine the outcome of their investigation was now less than 24 hours away. Charleston City Hall buzzed with activity as media outlets set up cameras and microphones in the main press room, the atmosphere charged with anticipation for Chief Harrison's address on what local news was calling Federal overreach in local policing. Jasmine observed the preparations from across the street, disguised in a conservative pantsuit with press credentials for a digital news outlet hanging around her neck, her hair styled differently, and glasses completing the transformation. Through her earpiece, she maintained contact with her team, strategically positioned throughout the area. "Target 1 has arrived," came the voice of Agent Rodriguez, who was monitoring the rear entrance. "Harrison is with Pearson and 3 uniformed officers." "Sir, it's Deuce. Reynolds just pulled up in a separate vehicle." Jasmine acknowledged the update while scanning the gathering crowd for Bennett, spotting him positioned near the podium, in uniform, his face a careful mask of professional detachment. Their earlier verification of his information had proven accurate. The thumb drive contained damning evidence of systematic profiling and corruption. Simultaneously, another NIA team was preparing to intercept the drug shipment at the port, waiting for Jasmine's signal to move once the press conference was fully underway. "Testing our media room feed now," reported Agent Diaz, who had hacked into the press room's camera system. "We'll have visual on every angle once they start." Jasmine entered the building, blending with the stream of reporters and photographers. She took a position in the middle of the press gallery, not so close as to draw attention, but with a clear line of sight to the podium. Right on cue, Chief Harrison appeared, the consummate professional in his dress uniform adorned with commendations. Assistant Chief Pearson stood slightly behind him, with Reynolds positioned at the side of the stage, looking vigilant and authoritative, a carefully choreographed image of competent leadership. "Thank you all for coming," Harrison began, his deep voice projecting sincerity. "Recent events have raised questions about interactions between federal agencies and local law enforcement that I'd like to address directly." The chief launched into a practiced narrative about cooperation and respect between agencies while emphasizing the importance of proper protocols. On the screens behind him appeared edited body camera footage from Jasmine's detention, carefully selected to show her appearing uncooperative while omitting Reynolds' aggressive actions. "As you can see," Harrison continued, gesturing to the misleading footage, "our officers maintained professionalism while attempting to verify the identity of an individual engaged in suspicious surveillance of a residential neighborhood. The manipulation was skillful, designed to create a public narrative that would undermine Jasmine's credibility and the legitimacy of the federal investigation." Jasmine waited as reporters began asking predictable questions, most playing directly into the narrative Harrison had established. When a natural opening appeared, she raised her hand and was acknowledged. "Susan Chen, Digital Chronicle." She introduced herself with her cover identity. "Chief Harrison, could you explain why Officer Reynolds reacted so strongly to the mention of Operation Kingfisher during this encounter? That detail seems to be missing from your presentation." The question landed like a stone in still water, creating immediate ripples of tension. Harrison's practiced smile faltered momentarily as he glanced at Pearson, whose face had hardened into a mask. "I'm not familiar with that particular detail," Harrison recovered smoothly. "Perhaps it was mentioned in the full report, which I'd be happy to review." Jasmine pressed further her questions strategically, designed to unravel their narrative. "I have here," she continued, pulling documents from her portfolio, "departmental records showing Officer Reynolds has 17 complaints of racial profiling, all dismissed under Assistant Chief Pearson's signature. Would you consider that relevant context for understanding this incident?" The press room stirred with interest as other reporters perked up at this new angle. Harrison's expression tightened. "I'm not sure where you obtained those records, but individual complaint histories are not relevant to the specific incident we're discussing today." Jasmine sensed Reynolds recognizing her despite the disguise, his eyes narrowing as he studied her face. She accelerated her timeline, knowing her cover would soon be blown. "I also have documentation of a departmental point system that rewards officers for stops and arrests specifically targeting minority residents in affluent neighborhoods like Oakwood Heights." She held up printed evidence from Bennett's thumb drive. Would you care to comment on how this policy shapes interactions like the one we're discussing? The room erupted with questions as other reporters demanded to see the documents. Harrison attempted to regain control, his voice rising. These allegations are completely unfounded and potentially libelous. This press conference is about a specific incident, not anonymous accusations. As the chaos unfolded, Jasmine made eye contact with Bennett, who gave an imperceptible nod before speaking into his radio, the signal confirming that Pearson had just sent the order for the drug shipment to proceed, believing the distraction successful. Jasmine activated her team with a predetermined phrase, "I believe the public deserves transparency on these matters." Within seconds, Rodriguez confirmed the operation at the port was in motion. Meanwhile, Jasmine continued her strategic revelation, gradually making her questions more pointed until Reynolds could no longer contain himself. "That's her," he suddenly interrupted, pointing directly at Jasmine. "That's the NIA agent." The press room froze momentarily before erupting into chaos, cameras swinging toward Jasmine as she calmly removed her glasses. "Deputy Director Jasmine Cole, National Intelligence Agency." She confirmed, her voice carrying authority that cut through the noise. "And yes, I was the woman illegally detained by Officer Reynolds while conducting a legitimate federal investigation into corruption within this department." Harrison immediately moved to shut down the conference. "This session is over. Security, please escort all media representatives from the building." As reporters protested, Pearson whispered urgently to Harrison, who then added, "This woman is interfering with an ongoing police operation and needs to be removed." The chaos provided the cover Jasmine needed. As Reynolds moved toward her with clear intent, Bennett intervened, appearing to follow orders while subtly blocking his partner's direct path. "Sir, I'll handle this section," he said loudly enough for others to hear, positioning himself between Reynolds and Jasmine. The momentary obstruction gave Jasmine the opportunity to slip through a side door during the confusion, making her way rapidly toward Harrison's office while the attention remained on the press room. Using the electronic keycard Bennett had provided, she gained access to the chief's private office. Working quickly, she located and photographed documents confirming Harrison's knowledge of Pearson's operation, signed authorizations for special assignments that aligned perfectly with known drug movement dates, financial records showing unexplained deposits, and a burner phone hidden in a hollowed-out departmental policy manual. As she finished securing the evidence, her earpiece crackled with an urgent warning from Rodriguez. "Cole, the port team is meeting heavy resistance. They were expected. Multiple officers involved, heavily armed. The operation was compromised at a level that suggested their leak went beyond the local department." Jasmine was processing this revelation when the office door burst open, revealing Reynolds with his weapon drawn, flanked by two officers she recognized from Bennett's evidence as part of Pearson's inner circle. Well, Reynolds said, his earlier humiliation transformed into dangerous triumph. "Breaking and entering, theft of confidential police documents. That's going to look great in tomorrow's headlines." Behind him, Jasmine could see Bennett being restrained by another officer, blood trickling from a cut above his eye. Their gazes met briefly, communicating volumes about the deteriorating situation. As Jasmine calculated her limited options, Reynolds gestured with his weapon. "The assistant chief would like a word with you, Deputy Director. And this time, your fancy title isn't going to help you. Do you believe there are good officers who stay silent about corruption within their departments?" Comment number 1. If you think officers like Bennett should come forward earlier, or comment number 2, if you understand why they might fear retaliation. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of courage against systemic injustice. What would you do in Jasmine's position, surrounded by corrupt officers with evidence in your possession that could bring down their entire operation? Let's see how this dangerous standoff unfolds. The storage room in the basement of the police station was deliberately chosen for its isolation, a space where raised voices wouldn't carry, and security cameras had convenient maintenance issues that left them non-operational. Reynolds marched Jasmine down the narrow corridor, his grip unnecessarily tight on her arm, a small act of revenge for his earlier humiliation. Unlike her previous detention, there was no pretense of procedure this time, no booking, no processing, nothing that would create an official record of her presence. "Not so high and mighty now, are we?" Reynolds muttered as he shoved her into a metal chair, the department's usual handcuffs replaced with heavy-duty zip ties that bit into her wrists. The room contained industrial shelving stacked with old case files and equipment, a single bare bulb casting harsh shadows across concrete walls. Jasmine remained silent, her mind racing through contingency plans while cataloging every detail of her surroundings. The door opened again as Assistant Chief Pearson entered his tailored uniform, a stark contrast to the grime of the storage room. "Deputy Director Cole," he greeted her with mocking formality. "I'd say this is a pleasure, but we both know that would be insincere." He dismissed the other officers with a sharp nod, keeping only Reynolds at the door. Once they were alone, Pearson's professional facade dropped entirely. "You've been a significant inconvenience, Director Cole. Months of careful planning jeopardized because you couldn't mind your own federal business." His casual tone belied the dangerous reality of her situation. Isolated, restrained, and in the custody of men who had already demonstrated their willingness to break the law. "We've known about your investigation for weeks," Pearson continued, pacing slowly in front of her. "Did you really think we wouldn't have sources inside federal agencies? Charleston is our city. The connections we've built over generations don't disappear because some Washington bureaucrats decide to play hero." Jasmine noted the absence of Bennett among the officers, a concerning development that suggested he might have been compromised or worse. "Is that what this is about, Assistant Chief?" She finally spoke, her voice steady despite her precarious position. "Protecting your territory, or is it the 30% cut you take from every shipment that moves through your officers?" The statement was calculated to provoke a reaction, confirming her knowledge of specific details that only someone with inside information would possess. Pearson's momentary surprise confirmed she'd hit the mark. "You're well informed," he acknowledged with narrowed eyes, "which makes me wonder who's been talking." His suspicious glance toward Reynolds made the officer shift uncomfortably. "It wasn't me, sir," Reynolds defended quickly. "I've been loyal from the beginning." Pearson waved away his protest. "Relax, Reynolds. Our deputy director here has multiple sources, don't you? Including some who might be surprised to learn how expendable they are." The implied threat toward Bennett or other informants was clear. Meanwhile, Jasmine was acutely aware that her team at the port had walked into a trap, suggesting the corruption network had deeper roots than they'd initially assessed. "Your operation at the docks was impressive, I'll grant you that," Pearson said, confirming her fears. "Good tactical approach, solid surveillance. Unfortunately for your team, the real shipment was moved yesterday. They're currently chasing empty containers while my people are safely distributing product across 3 states. The revelation that they'd been outmaneuvered stung, but Jasmine's expression revealed nothing. Her silence seemed to irritate Pearson, who leaned closer. "You federal types always think you're smarter than local law enforcement. That arrogance makes you predictable." In the background, Jasmine's finely tuned senses detected movement in the corridor outside, subtle sounds that Reynolds, focused on the confrontation, missed entirely. She needed to keep Pearson talking while her team executed whatever extraction plan was underway. "The political protection you mentioned," she said, redirecting the conversation. "That reaches to the state level, I assume the governor's office." The question was designed to elicit specific names that could expand their investigation. Pearson laughed, apparently enjoying the chance to demonstrate his reach. "Higher than that. Why do you think your superiors are so eager to shut down your investigation? The mayor made one phone call to Washington, and suddenly the attorney general is concerned about jurisdictional overreach." His confidence confirmed what Jasmine had suspected. Their operation faced opposition not just from corrupt local officers, but from powerful political figures with vested interests in maintaining the status quo. Pearson pulled a chair opposite Jasmine, sitting with the casual posture of someone holding all the cards. "So here's what happens next, Deputy Director. Option 1, you leave Charleston with a manufactured, successful conclusion to your investigation. We give you some low-level distributors to arrest you, get your headlines. Everyone's happy." He paused, letting the alternative hang in the air before continuing. Option 2 is considerably less pleasant. We've found that federal agents aren't immune to the same evidence planting techniques that work so well on ordinary citizens. Imagine the scandal when the decorated deputy director is found with substantial quantities of the very drugs she's supposedly investigating. The threat was delivered with such matter-of-fact calmness that Reynolds visibly tensed, perhaps realizing for the first time the extent of what he'd become involved in. "Framing a federal agent," Jasmine observed quietly. "That's a bold escalation from your usual tactics, Assistant Chief." Pearson shrugged. "Desperate times. Your little crusade threatens an enterprise worth millions annually. Did you think we'd just surrender because you flashed a federal badge?" As Pearson laid out his ultimatum, Jasmine noted Reynolds's growing discomfort. The officer shifted his weight repeatedly, his eyes darting between her and his superior. She recognized the opportunity to exploit the fracture. "Officer Reynolds," she addressed him directly, "are you comfortable with conspiracy to commit false imprisonment of a federal agent? That's 20 years minimum. Assistant Chief Pearson might have political protection, but do you think that extends to every officer in his operation?" Reynolds' Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed nervously. "Sir, maybe we should just process her properly. We've made our point." Pearson turned on him with unexpected viciousness. "Getting squeamish now, Reynolds, after everything you've done, the bribes you've taken, the evidence you've planted, the witnesses you've intimidated." Each accusation landed like a physical blow, pushing Reynolds further into a corner. "Need I remind you about the Johnson case? That was your operation from start to finish." The mention of this case caused Reynolds to pale visibly, suggesting it involved something particularly damning. The tension between the two men created exactly the distraction Jasmine needed. While they argued, she activated the emergency transmitter hidden in her watch, a device specifically designed to function even when other communications were blocked. The signal would alert her team to her precise location within the building. What neither man realized was that Jasmine had anticipated potential capture and taken precautions. During her earlier meeting with Bennett, she had provided him with specialized recording devices that activated automatically in the presence of specific keywords, terms like operation, shipment, and evidence that Pearson had been using freely during their conversation. Every incriminating word was being captured and transmitted to secure NIA servers. The storage room door suddenly swung open, revealing Detective Layla Carter from Internal Affairs, flanked by Officer Bennett and several uniformed officers whose serious expressions suggested they weren't part of Pearson's corrupt network. "Assistant Chief Pearson," Carter announced formally, "you need to come with us." Reynolds reached for his weapon, but froze when multiple guns turned in his direction. "I wouldn't," Bennett advised quietly. "Enough people have been hurt already." Pearson's face contorted with rage as he looked from Carter to Bennett. "You're making a career-ending mistake, Detective, and he spat at Bennett, "you're a dead man." Carter remained professionally detached as she responded, "The only careers ending today are those of officers who betrayed their oaths." She nodded to another officer who moved forward to cut Jasmine's restraints. As Jasmine stood rubbing circulation back into her wrists, she addressed Pearson directly. "I should thank you, Assistant Chief. Your conversation has been extremely informative." She tapped her watch, then pointed to the light fixture above them where a miniature camera had been disguised. "And not just for those of us in this room. Your entire confession has been broadcasting live to the Attorney General's office for the past 20 minutes. Pearson lunged toward her in blind fury, but was quickly restrained by 2 officers. "You're lying, Yaush," he shouted, desperation creeping into his voice. "This room is secure." Jasmine allowed herself a small smile as she retrieved her phone, displaying a live connection to Director Washington and several Justice Department officials who had witnessed everything. No room is secure from an agency that specializes in surveillance, Assistant Chief. You might control the local political landscape, but there are some lines that even your connections won't cross to protect you. As Pearson was led away, still hurling threats and accusations, Reynolds stood frozen in place, the full impact of his situation sinking in. "Officer Reynolds, boy," Jasmine addressed him calmly, "you have a choice to make. Pearson named several specific incidents involving you directly. Cooperate fully, and that cooperation will be noted in sentencing recommendations." The offer hung in the air as Reynolds visibly weighed his limited options before his shoulders slumped in defeat. "I want immunity," he said quietly, "in exchange for everything I know about Pearson's operation and who protects it." While this drama unfolded in the station basement, Jasmine received word that her team at the port had recovered from the initial ambush and, acting on Bennett's intelligence, had intercepted the actual drug shipment at a secondary location. The coordinated operation had successfully dismantled a major distribution channel while securing evidence that would implicate numerous officers and officials. As Jasmine left the storage room, Bennett fell into step beside her. "Your team is securing the evidence from Harrison's office," he informed her, "and Carter has officers at his home preventing any document destruction." Jasmine nodded appreciatively. "You took an enormous risk, Officer Bennett. That decision will save lives." Bennett's expression remained serious as he replied, "It nearly cost some, too. The officer who discovered me accessing the files, I had to convince him I was planting evidence against you rather than gathering it against Pearson." The admission highlighted just how dangerous his position had been. "The department won't be the same after this," he added, uncertainty clouding his features. "That's the point," Jasmine responded as they walked toward the exit. "It wasn't working as it was. Now there's a chance to rebuild something better." Chaos erupted throughout Charleston Police Department headquarters as word spread of Assistant Chief Pearson's detention and the federal operation unfolding simultaneously across the city. Jasmine strode purposefully through the corridor alongside Bennett and Detective Carter, coordinating with her team via earpiece, while uniformed officers scrambled in confusion around them. Director Washington confirms the Attorney General has the full confession. Agent Rodriguez reported through the comlink. They're expediting warrants for everyone Pearson named. The operation was proceeding successfully until an urgent alert came from an officer stationed outside the interview room where Pearson was being held. He's gone. Repeat. Pearson has escaped custody. Security camera footage revealed how Pearson had exploited the momentary distraction of a fire alarm to overpower the officer guarding him, taking the officer's weapon and access card before disappearing into the emergency stairwell. "He's heading for the evidence room," Jasmine realized immediately. "There are files there that could implicate everyone in his network." Carter confirmed this assessment. The original hard copies of the profiling directives and financial records are stored there. With those gone, the digital evidence could be contested as potentially manipulated. They raced toward the evidence room, only to find the security door ajar and an officer unconscious on the floor. Inside file cabinets had been ransacked with specific documents clearly targeted and removed. "He knows exactly what he's looking for," Bennett observed grimly as they secured the scene and called for medical assistance for the injured officer. A building-wide alert was issued, but Jasmine suspected Pearson was already executing a prepared escape plan. Meanwhile, a separate team led by Agent Diaz reported an equally concerning development. Chief Harrison received warning about the operation. "He's at his residence destroying evidence. We're 5 minutes out, but might be too late." Jasmine made a rapid tactical decision, splitting their resources to pursue both high-value targets. Carter, secure the department and coordinate with local FBI for additional support. Bennett, you're with me. We're going after Pearson. As they rushed to the parking structure, Jasmine's team tracked Pearson's phone signal heading east toward the wealthy waterfront district. He's using his personal vehicle, Bennett noted with surprise as they entered Jasmine's government SUV. Standard procedure would be to take an unmarked department car or switch vehicles. Jasmine processed this anomaly as she accelerated out of the garage. He's too experienced for that kind of mistake. He wants us to follow him. The realization prompted her to adjust their approach, maintaining pursuit while preparing for potential ambush. Traffic camera feeds tracked Pearson's black Cadillac weaving aggressively through downtown Charleston, endangering pedestrians and other drivers in his desperate flight. He's heading toward the private airfield in Mount Pleasant. Bennett identified the likely destination. There's a municipal airport there that handles private jets and charters. Jasmine immediately connected the dots. Of course, a prearranged escape route. His network must include someone with aviation resources. She contacted Washington with this development, requesting air support and clearance to prevent any unauthorized departures from the airfield. The high-speed pursuit through Charleston's historic streets required all of Jasmine's advanced driving skills, maneuvering through narrow passages and around obstacles that Pearson deliberately created by forcing other vehicles into their path. Bennett gripped the dashboard, visibly impressed, despite the tense circumstances. "Where did you learn to drive like this?" he asked as Jasmine executed a perfect controlled drift around a tight corner. "Advanced tactical driving at Quantico," she replied without taking her eyes off the road. "Finished top of my class there, too, despite what some instructors thought a woman could handle." The subtle reference to overcoming bias wasn't lost on Bennett, who had witnessed similar prejudices throughout his career. As they approached the Cooper River Bridge, Pearson's vehicle accelerated dangerously, weaving between lanes in an attempt to create distance. "He's making call," reported the technical analyst, monitoring his phone activity. "Multiple connections to burner phones across the city." Jasmine processed this information as she maintained pursuit. "He's activating his network either for assistance or to initiate contingency plans. Alert all teams to expect increased resistance." The analyst confirmed another troubling development. One call traced to a private number at the airfield. Flight plan filed 20 minutes ago for a citation jet to the Bahamas. Their target's escape route was becoming clearer, but so was his desperation. A desperate suspect with Pearson's training and connections represented an extreme threat level. As they crossed into Mount Pleasant, Pearson made an unexpected turn, taking a service road that wound through an industrial area leading to the private airfield's rear entrance. He's avoiding the main gate where security would be enhanced by now. Jasmine noted, adjusting their route accordingly. Bennett studied the area map on his tablet. This approach takes him past several warehouses his brother-in-law owns. They could have people waiting. The warning proved prescient as they rounded the final curve to see Pearson's Cadillac. Lack stopped beside a nondescript warehouse with 3 armed men in tactical gear taking up defensive positions. Beyond them, the private airfield's perimeter fence was visible, and on the tarmac, a sleek private jet's engines were already spinning up. "Federal agents, take cover!" Jasmine shouted as she executed a precision stop, positioning their vehicle for maximum protection while maintaining tactical advantage. Gunfire erupted immediately, forcing them to duck behind the engine block as bullets pinged off the reinforced vehicle. 4 hostiles visible, possibly more inside. Jasmine assessed calmly, her combat training evident in her methodical response to the ambush. "Pearson is moving toward the fence line." Bennett checked his service weapon, his expression resolute, despite being clearly outside his usual experience level. "I count 5. There's another on the warehouse roof with a rifle." His observation demonstrated situational awareness that impressed Jasmine. "Good eye," she acknowledged before contacting her tactical team. "We need immediate backup at the east perimeter of Charleston Executive Airport. Armed hostiles, federal suspect attempting to flee jurisdiction." While awaiting reinforcements, Jasmine identified a strategic approach that would allow them to advance while maintaining cover. "We move in coordinated bursts, leapfrogging positions to that shipping container," she instructed Bennett, who nodded his understanding despite the tension evident in his features. Their synchronized movement drew concentrated fire but allowed them to reach better cover without injury. From their new position, they could see Pearson cutting through the perimeter fence, his escape to the waiting aircraft seemingly imminent. The situation escalated further when the pilot emerged from the plane, clearly being forced at gunpoint to continue the departure preparations. "He's taken a hostage," Bennett observed grimly. Tactical response is now a hostage situation. Jasmine rapidly calculated options, none of them ideal. A direct assault risked the pilot's life while allowing Pearson to escape would mean losing their primary target and the evidence he carried. The standoff intensified as Pearson reached the aircraft with his hostage turning to face them across the tarmac. "Cole," his shouted voice carrying across the distance, "I'm leaving with these documents. Any attempt to stop this plane will result in casualties." The explicit threat against the hostage created a critical decision point. Jasmine maintained communication with her tactical team, now surrounding the airfield, but unable to move without endangering the pilot. An unexpected development shifted the dynamics of the confrontation when one of Pearson's armed associates approached him, apparently questioning the escalation to hostage-taking. Their heated exchange suggested fractures in Pearson's support network, some willing to participate in corruption and drug trafficking, but drawing the line at more violent crimes against innocents. Jasmine recognized the opportunity to exploit this division. "Your associates are realizing the difference between facing corruption charges and federal kidnapping and attempted murder of federal agents," she called out, her voice projecting authority. "Only one of those carries the death penalty, assistant chief." The psychological pressure landed effectively, causing visible uncertainty among Pearson's remaining supporters. As tensions mounted, Jasmine's phone rang with an unexpected caller ID, Officer Reynolds. "I know how Pearson thinks," Reynolds said without preamble when she answered. "He's got a secondary extraction plan. The plane is a distraction. There's an access tunnel from the maintenance hangar that leads to a boat dock on the other side of the perimeter. Used to be for fuel deliveries before they upgraded the facility." The intelligence offered as Reynolds' first step toward cooperation provided the tactical advantage they needed. While maintaining the standoff at the aircraft, Jasmine dispatched a secondary team to secure the tunnel exit. Meanwhile, she continued negotiating with Pearson, intentionally focusing his attention on the aircraft scenario while her team moved into position. The hostage situation grew increasingly volatile as Pearson, sensing his diminishing options, became more erratic. "Final warning, Cole, the plane leaves in 2 minutes or the pilot doesn't walk away." Jasmine needed to buy more time while her team completed their positioning. "You're too smart for this, Pearson," she responded, engaging his ego. "Harming a hostage converts this from a corruption case to a federal terrorism charge." Is that the legacy you want the respected assistant chief who devolved into a terrorist when cornered? The psychological approach created just enough hesitation for her plan to fully deploy. In a coordinated movement precisely timed with her tactical team, Jasmine initiated a daring resolution to the standoff. While she maintained Pearson's attention at the aircraft, Agent Rodriguez led a team through the maintenance tunnel, emerging behind Pearson just as he prepared to board. The sudden appearance of federal agents from his escape route visibly shook Pearson, creating the momentary distraction needed for the pilot to break free and take cover. With his hostage gone and escape routes blocked, Pearson made a final desperate attempt to destroy the evidence, attempting to ignite the documents he carried. Bennett reacted with unexpected quickness, tackling Pearson before he could complete the action. The confrontation ended with Pearson subdued, and in custody, the crucial evidence secured, and all hostages safe without casualties. As federal agents secured the scene and began processing Pearson's associates, Jasmine approached Bennett, who sat quietly on a cargo container, processing the intensity of what had transpired. "That was exceptional work, Officer Bennett," she acknowledged sincerely, "especially for someone without tactical field experience." Bennett looked up, exhaustion and relief mingling in his expression. "I keep thinking about my nephews," he admitted, "about what kind of world they'll grow up in if people like Pearson get to make the rules." His simple explanation encapsulated everything that had driven him to risk his career and life to stand against corruption. As they prepared to transport Pearson back to federal custody, reports came in confirming the successful operation at Chief Harrison's residence, where agents had interrupted his attempt to destroy evidence and secured additional documentation that would prove crucial to their case. The coordinated takedown of the department's two highest-ranking corrupt officers represented a watershed moment for Charleston law enforcement, one that would have repercussions throughout the political and criminal landscape of the region. Pearson, securely restrained in a federal transport vehicle, fixed Jasmine with a look of pure hatred. "This isn't over, Cole. You have no idea how deep this goes or who you're really fighting." His threat carried the weight of someone who believed in powerful protection that had not materialized when needed. Jasmine met his gaze without flinching. "No, Assistant Chief. For you, it is very much over." As the vehicles departed toward the federal detention center, Bennett asked the question that had been forming since their pursuit began. What happens to the department now? There's going to be a massive void in leadership. Jasmine considered the question seriously as they walked back toward their vehicle. "That depends partly on officers like you, Bennett. Transforming a department requires more than removing corruption. It needs people committed to building something better in its place." The rebuilding process would be challenging, but the day's events had created an opportunity for genuine reform that hadn't existed before. As the sun set over Charleston, the full scope of their operation became clear. A major drug trafficking network dismantled, corrupt leadership removed, and crucial evidence secured that would lead to dozens of additional indictments. What had begun with a simple act of racial profiling had exposed a system of corruption that had poisoned law enforcement throughout the region and opened the door to meaningful change. 1 month after the dramatic arrest of Assistant Chief Pearson, the federal courthouse in Charleston was filled to capacity as Deputy Director Jasmine Cole prepared to testify before a specially convened grand jury. The case had captured national attention, with media outlets framing it as either a long overdue reckoning with systemic corruption or an example of federal overreach, depending on their political leanings. Jasmine entered the courtroom in a crisp navy suit, her composure unwavering despite the gravity of the proceedings. For 3 hours, she methodically presented evidence connecting Chief Harrison, Assistant Chief Pearson, and 12 other officers to the elaborate corruption network that had operated within the Charleston Police Department for nearly a decade. Her testimony detailed how racial profiling had been weaponized as both a revenue-generating mechanism and a tool to facilitate drug trafficking operations in targeted neighborhoods. The department's unofficial point system rewarded officers for stops and arrests of minority residents in affluent areas, she explained to the attentive jurors. Higher points were awarded when these encounters resulted in property seizures or when the residents subsequently moved away from the neighborhood. She presented spreadsheets tracking these points alongside officer bonuses and promotion recommendations. This systematic targeting served multiple purposes, she continued. It created a climate of fear that kept certain communities from questioning police activities, established territories where Pearson's drug distribution network could operate with minimal interference, and generated millions in asset forfeitures that were partially diverted to fund further illegal operations. The evidence was damning, supported by financial records, text messages, and testimony from multiple cooperating witnesses, including Officer Reynolds. In exchange for his cooperation, Reynolds had negotiated a reduced sentence but still faced significant prison time for his role in evidence tampering and civil rights violations. His detailed testimony about specific incidents of profiling, evidence planting, and witness intimidation provided crucial corroboration for the broader conspiracy case. Outside the courthouse, protesters gathered daily, many carrying signs with Jasmine's image alongside messages like, "Thank you for your courage," and "Justice matters." The case had become a flashpoint in ongoing national conversations about police reform, with Jasmine's composed response to racial profiling becoming a powerful symbol of resistance against systemic discrimination. Within the Charleston Police Department, dramatic changes were already underway. Officer Bennett had been promoted to lead a newly established internal accountability division tasked with implementing reforms and ensuring compliance with new anti-discrimination policies. His first act in the position had been to establish anonymous reporting channels for officers to safely report misconduct without fear of retaliation. Media coverage of the case expanded beyond the corruption aspects to highlight the racial profiling that had nearly derailed the investigation. National news programs featured interviews with residents of neighborhoods targeted by the department's discriminatory practices, many sharing stories similar to the experience of Bennett's brother-in-law. These personal accounts humanized the statistics and helped the public understand the real human cost of such policies. 3 weeks after her grand jury testimony, Jasmine returned to Charleston for a community meeting in Oakwood Heights, the affluent neighborhood where her detention had occurred. The community center was filled beyond capacity, with residents eager to hear directly from the federal agent whose investigation had exposed corruption in their local police department. "What happened to me that day was not unique," Jasmine explained to the gathered residents. "The only unusual aspect was that I had the institutional authority to demand accountability. Countless others have experienced similar or worse treatment without that recourse." She presented data showing how racial profiling incidents had disproportionately targeted the small percentage of minority residents and visitors to the neighborhood. These weren't random encounters based on suspicious behavior, she emphasized. They were systematic attempts to create a hostile environment for certain people based solely on their appearance. The statistics were sobering for many residents who had previously dismissed such claims as exaggerations or isolated incidents. Jasmine's presentation included body camera footage from multiple encounters, demonstrating the stark differences in how officers approached white residents versus people of color in identical situations. As part of the department's court-mandated reforms, comprehensive training programs were being implemented, with Jasmine serving as a consultant on anti-bias procedures. Every officer would undergo intensive retraining with particular emphasis on recognizing and countering implicit bias in policing decisions. Bias isn't always conscious, Jasmine explained during a training session for senior officers. Many times it operates below the level of awareness, influencing decisions that seem objective but actually reflect internalized stereotypes. The program included practical scenarios and data analysis that revealed patterns officers hadn't previously recognized in their own conduct. 1 week before returning to her regular duties in Washington, Jasmine received a request she hadn't expected. Officer Reynolds, awaiting sentencing, had asked to meet with her. The meeting took place in a conference room at the Federal Detention Center. Reynolds, in standard-issue jumpsuit, the confidence and aggression of their first encounter entirely absent. "I want to apologize," he began, his voice carrying the weight of genuine remorse rather than strategic contrition. "Not just for how I treated you that day, but for who I became on the force." He explained how his initial idealism about policing had gradually eroded under the influence of senior officers like Pearson, who had systematically normalized discriminatory practices by framing them as tactical necessities. "I started believing we were just being good cops, focusing resources where they were needed," Reynolds admitted. "Then it became about numbers, about looking good to superiors. Eventually, I stopped seeing people at all, just potential threats or opportunities for citations." His candor was unexpected, prompting Jasmine to ask why he'd requested this particular conversation. "Because you were right," he responded simply. When you said I was being used by corrupt leadership, that hit home after I saw the evidence. Everything I thought I was doing for law and order was actually making my community less safe, less just." His recognition of this fundamental contradiction seemed genuine, suggesting potential for meaningful rehabilitation despite the serious consequences he still faced. Following the successful prosecution of the corruption case, statistical analysis showed a dramatic drop in racial profiling incidents throughout Charleston. Traffic stops and pedestrian detentions of minority residents decreased by 78%, while legitimate crime clearance rates remained stable, contradicting claims that discriminatory practices had been necessary for effective policing. The most powerful indicator of change came 3 months after the initial arrests, when community reporting of crimes increased significantly in neighborhoods that had previously viewed police with suspicion and fear. Residents who had avoided contact with law enforcement began attending community policing meetings and providing information about genuine criminal activity, creating a cooperative atmosphere that improved public safety outcomes across demographic lines. On her final day in Charleston, Jasmine conducted a training session for a new generation of federal agents, incorporating lessons from the case into practical guidance for recognizing and addressing systemic discrimination. What happened in Charleston wasn't unique, she told the attentive trainees. Similar patterns exist in departments across the country, sometimes as explicit as the point system we uncovered, sometimes operating through unstated but understood practices. She emphasized how addressing such issues required both individual moral courage and institutional commitment to accountability. Officer Bennett could have remained silent, continuing his career without disruption, she noted. Instead, he chose to risk everything because he recognized that true law enforcement means upholding justice for everyone, not just those who look a certain way or live in certain neighborhoods. The session concluded with an unexpected development that pointed toward future challenges. Jasmine shared with Director Washington evidence they had uncovered, suggesting the corruption network extended beyond Charleston to several other cities with connections to larger criminal enterprises and political figures at the state and federal levels. "This case opened a door," she explained, displaying a complex network diagram of financial transactions and communications. But what we're seeing beyond that door suggests a much larger system of corruption that uses racial divisions as a tool for profit and control. Washington studied the evidence thoughtfully before responding. "You've started something important here, Jasmine. The question is how far we're prepared to follow it." His question acknowledged the political realities and powerful interests that might resist further investigation. The story concluded where it began, in Oakwood Heights, the affluent neighborhood where Jasmine had been wrongfully detained. She returned one last time, not in disguise or on surveillance, but openly walking the same streets where she had once been handcuffed and humiliated. This time, residents nodded in recognition and respect rather than suspicion. An elderly woman even approached to shake her hand and thank her for making the neighborhood safer for her mixed-race grandchildren. As Jasmine drove away from Charleston, she reflected on the changes her investigation had initiated. The corruption case had exposed not just criminal activity, but the mechanisms through which discrimination became institutionalized and exploited. While one department had begun the difficult process of reform, the larger systems that enabled such corruption remained largely intact across the country. The work of transformation had only just begun. What would you do if you witnessed racial profiling in your community? Would you have the courage to speak up like Officer Bennett, even when it's difficult? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories of justice, and share this video to help others understand the importance of standing against discrimination in all its forms. Thank you for joining us for this powerful journey from injustice to accountability. Together we can create communities where everyone is treated with dignity and respect. This story powerfully illustrates how systemic racism can become weaponized within institutions meant to protect all citizens equally. Jasmine Cole's experience highlights several critical lessons about justice in America. First, discrimination often serves as both a tool and a cover for deeper corruption. The Charleston Police Department's racial profiling wasn't just about bias. It was deliberately used to facilitate criminal enterprises while appearing to be normal policing. Second, changing broken systems requires individuals willing to take personal risks. Officer Bennett chose moral courage over career safety, demonstrating that internal change often begins with a single principled stand. Third, accountability must be structural, not just individual. Removing corrupt leaders without implementing new systems of oversight would have allowed similar problems to reemerge. Fourth, discrimination thrives in environments where it's normalized through professional culture incentives and institutional practices. The point system revealed how racism became embedded in seemingly neutral procedures. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, justice requires persistence against powerful opposition. Jasmine faced resistance from multiple directions: political pressure, departmental obstruction, and even limits from her own agency. Yet she continued pursuing justice despite these obstacles. The transformation in Charleston shows that meaningful change is possible, but only through determined effort that addresses both individual actions and the systems that enable discrimination to flourish. Have you ever witnessed injustice and struggled with whether to speak up? What would you do if you were in Officer Bennett's position, torn between loyalty to colleagues and doing what's right? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of courage against systemic discrimination moved you, please hit that like button to help others discover it too. Remember that change often starts with awareness. By subscribing to our channel, you'll support more stories that shine light on important social issues that need our attention. Consider sharing this video with friends and family who might benefit from understanding how discrimination operates within systems, not just through individual actions. Together, we can build communities where justice isn't determined by the color of someone's skin. Thank you for joining us today, and may we all find the strength to stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult. The world changes one brave action at a time.